Everybody, welcome back. Doing another Marvel Future Revolution video. In this one, do the devs finally speak out? Are we gonna hear something that we've been waiting to hear for a while? I got a link to some direct quotes. All right, so check that out. Also, I'm gonna talk about a potential new game mode that might be the best for everybody here. All right, and is it in the works? We'll see. I think, let me know what your thoughts are on that specific game mode in the comments below, as well as what you think about some of these comments from the dev folk. Let's get to it.
Bring me WolverThor!
All right, so first let me talk about this game mode real quick. It's going to be short because I think I might want to think about this, see what your comments are, and then maybe do a video pushing this concept more than anything else. So what I equate this to is sort of a theory crafting sandbox, so to speak, or maybe just a general sandbox. Now, before you say, don't we already have something like that with the dual sparring, or the, you could do raids as much as you want on a King Tron or something like that? It's not what I'm talking about. A lot of times in this game, people are like, I want to attempt to build a steampunk Widow, or a close quarters Widow, or I want to build a steampunk Captain Marvel. And because the resources are so rare in this game, it's hard to make or build up a build that a 100% will get you good success. Now, why wouldn't, well, I know the answer partially to this. Like, why wouldn't developers have a sandbox, so to speak, a theory crafting sandbox? You enter a room, you can pick one of three bosses, let's say a standstill boss like King Tron, a moving boss like Hellhawk, and another moving boss like, I don't know, Fenris or something. And you can test those bosses and build against those bosses and builds, and it'll show a DPS, or it's got so much health you can see a timer that you can kill it in. Either way, if they don't want to do a DPS thing, at least you can have an idea that it has so much health that it takes me 45 seconds or a minute and a half to kill this thing. I don't want to see stuff that kills it in like a minute. Or rather, let me tell you, 10 seconds or 15 seconds. That's not you want to get through a couple rotations in this. And I don't have enough fodder to build my steampunk, and it's like, I can't build it up high enough to test stats. So what I'd like to do is, I'm picking steampunk. I want to do with these stats. I want to move to these stats, and you could just move these things around a little bit. You literally paint your character on the screen. Maybe it can go full nano, but you can choose to have just 3 nanos on the head, 2 on the chest, and none on the other 2. Whatever. Something that like maybe is more attainable for some of the population, for like a content creator like me. But also any of those end game type players are like, I'm gonna nano everything and see what the best is. I'm gonna spend a bunch of time on this, and then I'm gonna invest heavily in something. Now, the reason devs might not do that is because part of their money making might be the fact that you go different routes. I think it would be more prudent to let somebody do that and decide a path and spend that money and feel good about that money being spent. So anyway, that's the thought for now. Let me know your comments below on that, and let's jump into the crux of this video, is what are the devs saying here? So if you are not aware, there was another Apple article that was about behind the design, the Marvel Future Revolution. All right, so this is an Apple article that came out on August 8th. I was looking at it yesterday a little bit, finished reading it today. The main person, maybe you don't want to call him a dev if you don't want, but it's the Netmarble production director, John Lee. So they talk about the game extensively here. All right, and I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to cover this at a high level quickly, and then I'm going to go through it a little bit after that, in a sense where I got to give some more comments as I go through it. So if you want a quick version of it, I'll give you that. If you'd like to like and subscribe, still appreciate you. So the long and short of this is that he talks a lot about the game, how they came upon making it, the different approaches that they had to it. It really is sort of honestly, the title sort of covers it, a behind the design, the things that they were thinking about when they did some of these things. There are certainly different aspects of this that I was like, wait a minute, hold on, what about, as I was reading this, and I'll go over those a little bit more detail and towards the end. But It was interesting to see some of the thoughts from Joe Lee here about this. His I live to be a clown. I have to admit that section I really enjoyed. I was like, you know what, this person seems like a down-to-earth, normal human being, which is all I can really ask for anyone. They talk about the designs a little bit, like that. This was some Scarlet Witch concept art for, I think it was Rise of the East. They talk about the convergence idea, how they came across with that, which obviously makes sense, in ways that you've got to do games like this. It's all about trying to figure out a way that there can be 10 Iron Man and it's not a big deal. So there's, multiverses, convergences. Really, that's about it. It's all about just different universes or, things coming together or different Earths or worlds. They wanted it to be the flashiest superhero game and just really for people to feel really good about playing their characters, which I will admit that I think they did a pretty good job on. When you play these characters, I definitely feel like, all right, this feels like I'm a Captain America. This feels like a Black Widow or an Iron Man or a Spider-Man. Those type of things seem to make sense for me when I play the game. So I think they did do well in that. One of the things they talked about in here was throwing too much information on the screen. I found this sort of funny because, in here they talk about health and skill and skill buttons, guard status, yet we get pop-ups nonstop about, things in Dark Zone. And it's just like, okay, you've succeeded in one part on this, but in another sense, there's still, a lot to be desired. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. They talked about how they developed their worlds a little bit by starting in a corner. I thought that was cool. They talk about contradicting the golden rule. I'll get to that a little bit because I want to read through that because I want to see if you guys understand it the same way I did. But it was an interesting article. I was not what I was hoping as far as like, this is like a roadmap or anything like that. It was really more about the behind the design, the way they came up with it. So I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly again. If you didn't want to go through this in more detail, appreciate you making this far. Thank you very much. If you want to leave a comment or anything below or hammer down the like button, appreciate you. All right, so Marvel Future Revolution pulls off a balancing act that's nothing short of heroic. I agree on some extent, and other parts I don't. Netmarble's open world superhero MMO RPG is a massive Marvel mashup, unites superheroes and supervillains, universes, timelines, giant free-for-all. I would not call it a giant free-for-all. That is one of the things where they talk about the open world. It's like, is it though? I mean, it's like when you play the game, you're really not in an open world. You go do your Blitz, you go do your Most Wanted, which is the most open world you get. But it's really just about hitting, let's call it 9 different people in different areas. Okay, I guess, but I'm typically doing that by myself. It's not a MMO aspect of it. So, okay. They cast the characters, that's great. Captain America, Iron Man. They list, Moon Knight and Rocket Raccoon and MODOK. Obviously, there's companions, NPCs, and villains in that. They talk about the portals, Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, Photon Blast. That's okay, great. And it also talks about toggling on autoplay mode, which I personally like as a working adult who doesn't always have time to do stuff like this. I can auto wherever and come back, in an hour or two or whatever and, dismantle something. And it's like, okay, cool. My game was playing. That's how I've got, if you looked at my screen, which, I've got right now, I'm dismantling some items and I've got almost 110 million gold. That's a lot of gold. And granted, I don't go crazy with transmute and stuff, but still, it's a lot. You can do it. All right. So they talk about Netmarble production director Joe Lee. Stuffing the ultimate comic book all-star game was only half the battle. For his game to be truly revolutionary, pun intended, Lee and his team knew they needed to level up on the gameplay mechanics, storyline, and visuals. After all, with great power comes, and they make a joke, So the goal to bring the full superhero experience to the widest possible audience. That's what they talked about. Now, I will say that they need to do better with that. As far as I can tell, there's 20 to 30, 40,000 people max playing this game right now, and that's throughout the globe. The profits that they're making, based on what we can tell with some, websites that aren't accurate necessarily, but when they do their net profit plan, this has been under the 3% mark for them, so we can sort of interpolate what they do there. I do believe they need to get to a wider audience. I do believe they need to find a way to have better retention, because the gameplay in this is outstanding, and that is something that I will give them credit for. When you play characters, they feel really good. The part that doesn't feel good is getting crushed by PvP people and then eventually feeling like it takes forever to build something up. Marvel has such a huge crowd and so many different characters. We needed to find our own big tweak, the thing that would get us to stand apart from everybody else. What is that? Okay, I don't know yet. It's going to be interesting, right? Lee speaks with pride about the game's range, how its characters intermingle across dimension, and how it truly stretches across the Marvel universe. I'd agree with that. Marvel Future Revolution begins in New York City, talks about the Ultrons, Midgardia, Fantasyland with Thor, Xanderth. But despite its grand scope, the game's multiversal chaos, galaxies snapping enemies, and feisty rodents are grounded in one single dimension design principle. Something that's driven the team from the beginning. In a game like this, when you're making big, important decisions, you always have to go back to your common sense. Okay, common sense, I guess that's the thing they're driving it, right? So my common sense is you need to find a way to retain players more. That it's really important that you need to do that because people aren't going to stick around if they don't feel good about what they're doing, right? The part that I like here, I live to be a clown. He broke into the industry about 2 decades ago, where he learned the ins and outs of partnering with big companies like Marvel because he was on the business development side. Before his impressive career, the lifelong gamer and business pro had a different passion. It was hip-hop dancing. I enjoy that. My wife likes to hip-hop dance. I think it's fun. It's a good exercise. It just, people have a really good time when they do that. He says, I think I live to be a clown. He laughs. I like to bring a good time to the people around me. The greatest part about dancing is that you're trying to make other people happy. But the happiest person in the moment is yourself. I think that's maybe why I got into games. I personally love that quote. I think it's great. This is the type of person that's, at that high of a level within the company working on things. I like that aspect of it, but again, all the things I've already said about things that need to be improved. It's paid off. Games have driven his entire career. Okay, so it's paid off for him. I like that. In the mid-2010s, he became a production director for Marvel Future Fight. So he has clearly been with successful games, and now he's here in Future Revolution. It talks about what that is, and it's an ancestor of Future Revolution. The game was and is smashing success and just celebrated its 7th anniversary. When you're dancing, you're performing for a couple dozen or maybe a couple hundred people. When I started out, I thought if I want to be a clown, I'd rather serve the bigger crowd. And in games, you're working for millions. That's what I live for. Now, are we playing and are there millions playing this game? It doesn't seem to be that way, but it would be awesome if this game got to that point, and I would absolutely love it, and I'm sure they would love it, and a lot of the different servers would love it because there'd be so many more people to play with and have fun and competition and those DDQs. And when you're trying to fight to get higher, you're still staying within your realm, so it doesn't feel like you're getting one shot by a bunch of people in different Omega Wars, because there's gonna be so many massive whales in it that they're gonna fight each other, which will be fine. While Future Fight's impact was becoming clear, Lee was already brainstorming for the sequel. We were always thinking, what if we had a better framework? What if we could use more recent technologies, he says. We had a yearning for something bigger. So that to me gives me some hope. They're like, they want this to be huge. I mean, we've got some of the top line voice actors. We've got orchestras. They've got a bunch of fantastic art in this. I personally am not going to give up on this game. They're going to have to close their doors and say, we're done. And I go, okay, I guess I'm giving up now. Because I just think that there's a baseline here and a motivation from these guys to make this game really good. So for that purpose, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to criticize when I think it needs to be criticized, but I think that there's going to be things in the game that are going to keep driving them. In Lee's mind, the potential sequel would elevate superhero experience as much as humanly as possible. We thought, okay, to give a true superhero experience to the player, all the powers from the comic books, all the experiences from the movies, we need a bigger space. And if we're talking bigger space, maybe it's an open world, and they talk about MMORPG, which, again, I think they do decently. I think this game, personally, I think they should consider a PC for it if they ever actually get to the point where it's successful enough. Obviously, it's not going to happen unless the game is in a really good state, and I don't even know if it would then. But I think that for this game to be really the apex of what it could be, something like that would be great. Big stakes, but common sense. The team's next challenge involved crafting a story that paid homage to Marvel's epic history, served as a gripping narrative in its own right, drew on familiar heroes and planets and powers, and would find the approval of both hardcore fans and newcomers. We wanted to convince core fans first, he says. We wanted every setting to actually make sense. And we needed, say, multiple Captain Americas, Scarlet Witches playing side by side. Hence the convergence. It makes sense. And then, like I mentioned, that was a little graphic art. Convergence provided an elegant solution to the story. If you can call multiple realities and multiple Earths colliding with each other a solution. Powered by multiversal magic and some old-fashioned comic book logic, the Convergence storyline not only allowed for an endless stream of battles, but also established a world which Iron Man can fly through a portal and talk to another Iron Man without either of them batting an eye. Plus, it's a total sandbox. Remember that thing at the beginning of the video? We want a different sandbox that I'm talking about with that. Marvel Future Revolution scenes could take place pretty much everywhere. All right, I would agree with that. Now, the script, and this is another thing, Mark Sumarek, who also worked on Future Fight, it was allowed for chaos the best kind. There's a mode called a Mega War, which prepares you for the upcoming battles. That's great. What would they do? You know, become practice for something bigger. I get it. Like, and that part of the story, it really guides you into the game modes very, very, very well. I do agree with that. Again, retention is the issue. What do you do when you get to that end game treadmill that keep your whales going and keep your free to play type or, you know, less spending type actively engaged? Because all those people need to be there. The flashiest superhero game. To pick the game's heroes, a sort of gym class dodgeball draft with some history. Some of history's greatest comic book characters, Lee and his team relied again on common sense. With the characters, all about what the game needed, not necessarily what was new. And I like that idea. Selecting and plotting characters. The most crucial aspect of the game's design was more about filling holes than drafting the biggest IP. The key was to balance the various mathematical formulas that power such games while also offering fantastic characters to play. I do think that they've done a decent job with this. I think that we're going to see how it evolves over time. Clearly, if we end up getting Wolverine here shortly, I think that that is several mutants in there. So, you know, we'll see how that kind of starts to evolve. When we added a character, we'll think, okay, we already have a few sorcery characters and damage dealers, maybe want a close quarter combat type. But also, if we already have Doctor Strange, do we need Wanda Maximoff? In that sort of case, we'll add special tweaks based on source material. And it's so they can even things out. The game's version of Doctor Strange is about damage dealing, which I'm sure some of my Doctor Strange friends feel, you know, a little irked by that. But, you know, Doctor Strange's gotten a little better, right? While it's Wanda with her well-documented reality-bending abilities, she's about crowd control. So I was like, okay, I'll buy that to an extent, though she does some massive damage as well. We defined visual direction for the characters first, a photorealistic style that could compete with AAA games. And I would absolutely agree with that. I think the graphics in this, the way everything moves, it is top tier. And that quote was from executive producer, I'm sorry that I might mess this up, but Dooyeon Chu. Some characters have a lean, sleek look, while others come off with a sturdy and rough. Each costume has a number of player-controlled variants too. Black Widow, all black, magenta. You can do that, and that's one of the things I do like. You can change the color schemes of your characters. Captain America with scary-looking shield and menacing spikes. You can do that. The flashiest superhero game was their internal motto, Cho says. We wanted to see heroes being heroes instead of being stationary and repeating similar moves over and over and over again, which I get. I've played some games like that where it's like you've got 4 moves and it just looks the same every time. And then you speed up the animation and it's just like they go stand there and they're just... That's what those games do. They're always moving. And then they go. And it's so your eye gets distracted by something. The flashiest superhero game... Oh, I talked about that. Okay. There were a few twists to consider, like the mix of airborne and non-airborne characters. This part makes me mad. Flying is surely a bonus when it comes to gameplay, but we wanted to even it out the benefits. Ground-based characters are highly maneuverable. Captain America, for instance, can super sprint while magic can teleport. Both helpful skills when you're fending off wave after wave of malfunctioning flying Ultrons. Notice, no mention of Black Widow. It hurts. That's my main for those who aren't aware. The team took plans to avoid throwing too much information on the screen. We talked about this earlier. I think they've done a decent job with that. They talk about needing to balance by selecting information players would need to constantly be aware of. Health, skill, button, guard damage, or guard status. I think they did a decent job with that, but also too many pop-ups. When it came time to design the map, the team started small because they say it's a pretty huge map. I'd say yes and no to that. Because right now you play the map once and that's basically it outside of your most wanted. We wanted to see that the target quality as soon as possible, and we'd start by focusing on a small corner of the map, one landmark, one enemy, maybe one NPC. From there, they'd sketch out the combat and drop in some dialogue once that was settled. It pretty much goes out the window laughs leave. By the time we're done, we're evolved so much, but at least we got the vision of, okay, this is what we were expecting. For those finding their way around the game or those who'd prefer to watch the battles unfold, they also offer autoplay. A concept that was also frequent topic of conversation in the offices. Autoplay can be tricky, and this is quotes from Cho. Some may see it as robbing the real gameplay experience, while others see it as a convenient feature. But for a game like this that requires players to play for a long time, we thought it would be useful. Now, I agree with that. I personally really like it to be in the game so that I can take a break. I can, kind of pay attention to something else, dodge or whatever. Or, I'm watching a movie and kind of, okay, cool. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I like it. The feature had 2 internal rules. First was manual play had to be great, fully featured option for players. Second, when players had autoplay enabled, there had to be room for them to manually intervene and make a difference, which I think they did pretty well. They talk about evade, ultimates, etc. All games need to be easy to learn, but hard to master, says Cho. Even with autoplay on, you'll need to find your way. You'll need to find your own way of mastering auto and manual play combined. And that's right. You know what I mean? I remember some people like, this is just an auto game. It's like, no, it's not. You cannot auto this game. You maybe first couple, zones a little bit, but you'll die until you get super high squad rank, and you've got to get much bigger. Here we are contradicting the golden rule. Now, you tell me if you think they answer what the golden rule is here, okay? This brings us to the opening mini-movie, a prologue that features a massive city battle, multiple flying villains, dramatically arriving heroes, and a surprising sacrifice. We wanted to wow players from the get-go. Okay, and I do think that intro movie did that. That said, Lee noted that including the scene was an early topic of debate amongst the team. One of the most common sense rules when designing a game is to get to the meat of the experience as soon as possible. I guess that's maybe getting to the end game, getting the raid, something like that. He says, and here we are contradicting that golden rule. I think what they mean by that is the fact that you go through all these zones and you level so much to get to the end game. I don't know. I personally really enjoyed the leveling experience and really getting to feel that. I mean, I don't think that's why people aren't sticking around. I think it's more about once you get to that end game and that fodder, but I don't know. Rather than focusing on gaming conventions, however, the Netmarble team strove to consider the big picture. Particularly the army of well-conditioned Marvel fans would be coming to the game with elevated expectations, which was very true. When you are creating this kind of game, you know it's going to appeal to a huge crowd, he says. We thought about what our audiences would be like and what they would expect and deserve. And we thought it was essential to have proper intro into a world that they'd hopefully be diving into for at least a few hours every day. The opening scene story twist wasn't simply meant to draw people in, it was also brought to wait on experience. And that's what it's all about, says Lee. A great game has to have emotional moments. It has to be a great time you're having. It could be the feeling of defeating a huge boss that you meant to beat for the first 4 or 5 rounds that you weren't able to defeat. Maybe it's the reward you get after getting the sweet, sweet victory you achieved. Maybe it could be the sum of all rewards. These moments elevate future Revolution to create a truly super experience for its players, and the Netmarble team is still hard at work to make the game even better. Everyone here is a Marvel nerd now, says Lee. So, and then it has to download the app. So this is clearly like a marketing thing that I think they're going to put out here pretty soon. Or maybe they'll hammer this home even more. We'll see. I think that it's an interesting article. It didn't give me all the stuff that I want as far as detail in game. I think it's a great look behind the scenes. I appreciate them doing this. It sounds like they've got a lot of good mentalities in there. Let me know what your thoughts are. I know this is a longer video. I normally don't like to read something this long. That's why I tried to give a brief version up front. So if you made it this far, I very much appreciate you. I would love to hear your comment. Hammer down like button, notification bell, subscribe if you like. And until next time, hope you have a wonderful day.